8:54 p.m. The cake had been my idea. That was the part I couldn't stop thinking about afterward, that I had suggested we do a proper birthday dinner, that I had driven 40 minutes across Charlotte to sit at that table, that I had worn the green blouse my mother always said looked professional. I had wanted stupidly to make it easy for all of us. My name is Renata Voss. I turned 28 that October, and my aunt slid the envelope across the tablecloth before the food even arrived. For our hardest worker, she said, and the smile she wore was the kind people practice. The room held its breath just long enough for me to understand it already knew the punchline. I opened the flap. A single dollar bill, and behind it a handwritten card on heavy cream paper, the kind my aunt reserved for things she wanted to feel official. For the girl who thinks invoices make her important. Here's your worth. My cousin Marcus laughed first, a bark that knocked loose everyone else's permission. My uncle tapped the table like he was applauding a performance. My mother, my aunt's younger sister, who had spent 20 years borrowing her approval, pressed her lips together and looked at her wine glass. I folded the card back along its original crease. It had creases. Someone had written that, folded it, carried it here. This was not a bad joke. It was a planned exhibit. I smiled and set it beside my bread plate like a receipt. Have you ever watched a room expect you to bleed and instead decide not to? There is something clarifying about it. Not peaceful, clarifying. Like a system error finally generating a useful code. I was a billing compliance analyst for a regional hospital network, which sounds boring in the way that load-bearing walls sound boring. I audited physician coding, flagged insurance irregularities, and ensured that every procedure our facilities billed could survive a federal review. I worked with numbers that, if mishandled, could cost the network millions and end careers. My family knew I worked in hospital paperwork, which they said the way people say assistant something. What they did not know was that the hospital network also managed billing for my aunt's private physical therapy practice, a contract I had quietly helped shepherd 2 years earlier, her out of serious trouble. She had thanked me then with a gift card to a restaurant I didn't like. I had not reminded her since. In that family, information was handled the way my aunt handled antiques. Displayed when useful, stored when not. Never shared freely. I left dinner early before dessert with a pleasantry thin enough to see through. Drove home with the card in my jacket pocket and the particular silence of someone who has just made a decision without yet knowing its full shape. The next 2 weeks I kept to my normal rhythms. Audits, reporting cycles, a recertification course on a Tuesday evening. I did not call. I did not post about it. I went to work and did my job with the same attention I always brought, and I kept my findings organized on a shared drive the way I always had, and I said nothing to anyone about changing any of it. My aunt called on a Wednesday breezy, as if October had happened in a different calendar. Renata, the quarterly submission is coming up. You'll handle the reconciliation the way you did last spring? I told her I was managing a significant internal deadline and would need to step back from outside consulting work for the foreseeable future. She paused. Outside consulting? You make it sound so formal. We're family, I know, I said. That's why I'm telling you directly instead of just not responding. She laughed, but the laugh was confused. She called again the following Monday. Then her office manager emailed. Then my cousin Marcus, who had laughed the loudest at the table, sent a message asking whether I was going through something, and whether I needed to talk. What people call concern and what people call surveillance look identical until you examine the timing. My mother called on a Thursday evening. Her voice was careful in the way voices get when someone else has written the talking points. Your aunt is worried. The practice is in a complicated place right now, and you know how she depends on you with the technical side of things. She can hire a compliance consultant, I said. I can send her names. Renata. A breath. Is this about the birthday thing? Because it was meant to be funny. You know how she is. I do know how she is, I said. That's accurate. You can't just withdraw from the family because your feelings were hurt. I looked at my apartment, the one I had moved into 14 months earlier after 3 years of careful saving. The one my aunt had told her friends was a bit sparse for someone our age. The one where I had, in fact, never once felt like I needed to justify a purchase or a choice or a Thursday evening to anyone. "I'm not withdrawing from anything," I said. "I'm just not available for certain things anymore." The compliance audit notice arrived at my aunt's practice 6 days later, generated by a routine insurance carrier review that I had nothing to do with. But I had known for 18 months that her documentation on a specific category of therapeutic billing was inconsistent in ways that would not survive scrutiny. I had flagged it twice. She had called it excessive caution. Marcus called in a panic. Her office manager called twice. My aunt finally called herself, and the warmth in her voice had been replaced with something more honest, which I actually respected more. "The carrier is questioning 14 months of claims. I need someone who understands how we coded those sessions to talk to the reviewer. I understand that's a difficult position." "Renata?" Her voice went somewhere unfamiliar. "I need your help, I know," I said. "I'm sorry I'm not in a position to provide it right now." She arrived at my building on a Friday evening without calling first. I watched through the intercom camera for a moment before I answered. She was in her good coat, the camel one she wore when she wanted to be taken seriously. Her assistant was parked at the curb. I came down to the lobby. I did not invite her up. We sat in the 2 chairs near the front window, a small table between us, the street noise keeping everything slightly impersonal. "I need you to explain to me what I did," she said, which surprised me. I had expected demands dressed as apologies. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I had taken of the card. She looked at it for a long time. "I wrote that when I was frustrated with you," she said. "You'd gotten the promotion, and I'd just had the worst quarter. And something about it made me want to." She stopped. "It doesn't have a good ending, that sentence." "No," I said. "It doesn't. I owe you an apology that I should have given before I needed something from you." She said it flatly, without ornament. "I know what this looks like. Let me tell you what I felt in that chair, because I want to be precise about it, not victory. Victory implies the goal was her suffering. What I felt was something closer to relief at clarity, that finally the scaffolding had come down and we were both looking at the actual structure. I told her I would provide her practice with a written summary of the documentation gaps I had identified over the past 18 months, formatted clearly enough that a new consultant could act on it immediately. I would do it once as a professional courtesy, and then I was done with informal arrangements. She would need to hire someone. I would not be that person. "You'd really do that?" she asked. "The summary? I'm not interested in watching the practice collapse," I said. "I'm just not available to prop it up privately anymore." She looked at me the way people look at someone they thought they understood. The next month was not dramatic. My aunt retained a compliance firm. The insurance review resulted in minor adjustments and a corrective action plan, manageable. My mother stopped relaying messages between us and started calling me directly, which felt like progress of a modest but real kind. Marcus never apologized for laughing, but he stopped sending the performative check-in texts, which was its own form of honesty. I met my aunt for coffee in December, neutral ground, a place neither of us had memories in. She looked tired. She had started seeing a therapist, she mentioned, unprompted, as though she wanted me to know she was paying attention to herself in new ways. "I used to think being the one who succeeded meant I got to set the terms for everyone else," she said. "If I called something a joke, it was a joke. If I called something generosity, it was generosity." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "I think I was wrong for a long time. I did not rush to fill the space after that. The dollar bill and the card are still in an envelope in my desk drawer. I have thought about burning them, the way you do in certain moods. But I have not yet because I am not sure I am finished learning from them. Some documents you keep until you understand everything they were trying to tell you. What I know now is that my usefulness was never invisible to that family. They knew exactly what I contributed. The card was not contempt for my unimportance. It was a test of whether I would accept contempt anyway, as the ongoing price of belonging. I did not open that door. Not because I wanted her to suffer in a lobby, but because I had finally understood that the person she had always expected me to be, available, silent, grateful for proximity, was not a person I was willing to keep performing. Here is what I want to ask you. And I mean it as a genuine question, not a conclusion. If the people who taught you your worth turned out to be unreliable narrators, what does it cost you to stop quoting them?